And we're back in Burkina Faso, where the country's leader ousted in the coup on Friday, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, has formally agreed to step down. And that's a statement coming from religious and community leaders. And just to help us discuss the situation is a Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Aworawo. He joins us virtually in Lagos. Good to have you join us.
Yeah, good afternoon.
All right, Prof, good afternoon. You and I are on several occasions, I think we've talked about the coups we've seen in West Africa, two within 9 months in Mali, and two now again since in Burkina Faso. One happened in January this year. Talk to us about how your reaction to this announcement, especially because when you look at the security situation in these countries, it has not really improved, even with the takeover of power by military officers.
Yes, the situation in Burkina Faso is very concerning. It's unfortunate because Damiba, who took over in January, the pretext for taking over was for him to tackle terrorism and reduce the violence that has engulfed the north of the country. That was the pretext that was used to take over government in January. But instead of the terrorism decreasing in Burkina Faso, what we have had is an expansion of terrorism in the country. The terrorists have gained more grants, taking more territory in the country, and more deaths have been recorded, in the country since January. For instance, in June, about nearly 90 civilians were killed by the terrorists. And just 4 days to this coup, on the 26th of September, we had that ambush of military men and the death of nearly a dozen Burkinabe soldiers and the kidnapping of nearly 100 civilians. So the coup of Damiba, instead of reducing the terrorism in the country, has rather expanded it. So the pretext for taking over government, has not been justified in the past 8 months that Damiba has been in power. And if I may just add, I do not also think that the current coup of Ibrahim Traore is going to do anything to reduce terrorism in the country. And that is because the right thing to be done to tackle terrorism in Burkina Faso has not been done.
And interesting you mentioned that, because I was just going to ask you if this new military government is, if it's going to be bring stability in terms of security to Burkina Faso, but you already spoke to that. So let me just ask you, the ECOWAS has now condemned this particular coup, calling the removal of Damiba unconstitutional, who also removed a sitting president unconstitutionally. But ECOWAS has set July 2023, if I'm right, for a return to civilian rule in that country. With this new latest development, do you see that happening? And where does that leave ECOWAS as well?
Yes, I mentioned earlier that the reason I do not have confidence that the Ibrahim Traore coup of last Friday will lead to a reduction of terrorism in Burkina Faso is that the right thing has not been done. Say, for instance, the government is thinking that Russia has anything positive to add. They have been waving Russian flags and relying on Russia to help them to tackle terrorism in Burkina Faso. Russia is bogged down with its own problem with Ukraine, and anybody who thinks that Russia will abandon its own national interest there and come to combat terrorism in Burkina Faso is living a world of illusion. And that brings in ECOWAS, the question you just asked. Actually, the key to tackling the terrorism in Burkina Faso lies with ECOWAS and what the countries in the Sahel do. What will help to tackle terrorism in Burkina Faso is regional cooperation. So what ECOWAS is right to condemn, the coup in Burkina Faso because it's in line with his charter. The ECOWAS charter does not permit, military coups and taking over government through unconstitutional means. So ECOWAS is right to condemn the coup in Burkina Faso. But beyond condemning the coup, ECOWAS and indeed AU, they need to come together to help to establish infrastructure that will help to tackle terrorism, not just in Burkina Faso, but in the Sahel and in Africa at large. What records show is that it is only through regional cooperation where these countries will put resources together and ensure that these terrorists don't move from one country to the other. They're able to combat them together. That is the only way to tackle terrorism, not just in Burkina Faso, but also in Mali and other countries of the Sahel. That is what we expect ECOWAS to do. ECOWAS condemning the coup is right because it's in line with its charter. But beyond that, a whole lot needs to be done by ECOWAS.
But do you see a return to constitutional order by July 2023, which is a deadline set by ECOWAS?
Well, it depends on how the ECOWAS leaders go about addressing the issue. One will expect that ECOWAS would introduce sanctions such as they did in Mali. Something very, very elaborate. Close the border, do something drastic. A very long time, turn to civilian rule. ECOWAS needs to go beyond condemning to taking firm action to introduce sanctions against the new leaders so that they will be able to keep to a short time to hand over to civilians. That is the only way. Otherwise, these are just military boys, adventurers who want to enjoy political power. If nothing drastic is done, they will want to set maybe 3-4 years a calendar to return to civilian rule. So that is possible if ECOWAS does the right thing, and that right thing will be by pressuring the new leaders and introducing sanctions to ensure that they subject themselves to a short period to hand over to civilians.
All right, thank you so much for talking to us. I wish we could talk about this battle of influence between Russia and France in that region, but I'm sure we'll continue to watch out whether we'll see Russian boots in Burkina Faso. Thank you so much for talking to us as always. Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, David Aworawo.
Thanks so very much.